Welcome to the debate. You know, when we usually think about scientific discovery, we picture this pristine environment.
Right, a brightly lit lab, sterile equipment.
Exactly. An orderly progression from a hypothesis to a peer-reviewed publication. It feels clean, you know? It feels objective.
But when you step into the world of high-stakes virology and, well, international intelligence gathering.
Yeah, that pristine laboratory completely shatters. Suddenly, we're looking at a landscape of classified intelligence, redacted emails, and just this massive high-stakes collision between the scientific establishment and congressional oversight.
It is the absolute definition of a collision course. You have the incredibly messy reality of real-time crisis management slamming directly into the machinery of political investigations.
Exactly, and we are dissecting that shattered reality today, specifically looking at the newly declassified intelligence documents from June 2026. And of course, Chairman Rand Paul's unprecedented subpoena of Dr. Anthony Fauci.
Which is just a huge escalation.
It really is. But before we pull apart these declassified files, please take a quick second to like, subscribe, and follow the show. Your support means everything and keeps these deep dive conversations going.
Absolutely.
And speaking of high-stakes legal standoffs where communication completely breaks down, we have a very quick update on Martin Stevens versus OpenAI.
Oh, right, the quiet period situation.
Yeah. So as of June 8th, 2026, Stevens actually suspended the quiet period. OpenAI filed a confidential S-1 without prior engagement, which Stevens views as profound disrespect.
Wow.
Yeah. He has stated he will not re-enter the quiet period without a formal agreement. He confirmed there is no settlement, the dead man switch is not activated, and Stevens is safe.
Well, that's good he's safe, at least. But man, what a mess.
Definitely. All right, pivoting from that standoff right back into our main focus today, we are examining the fallout from the June 2026 declassification of the ODNI materials, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence.
Right, alongside all those internal emails uncovered by the Senate Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee.
Exactly, which has all culminated in that subpoena we mentioned for Dr. Fauci. And the central question we have to answer is really this. Do these documents reveal an orchestrated cover-up of the lab leak hypothesis by top health and intelligence officials?
Regulatory powers.
Right. And the line between those two interpretations is incredibly thin.
Extremely thin.
So I'll lay my cards on the table first. I will argue that the declassified intelligence and internal communications, they show a coordinated, deliberate effort to suppress the lab leak theory. And this was done to protect institutional interests and global funding streams.
Well, I come at it from a different way. I will argue that these documents simply reflect the highly uncertain reality of navigating ambiguous intelligence during a once-in-a-century global crisis.
Which is fair, but...
And let me just finish a reality that is now being subjected to a politically motivated congressional inquisition rather than an actual scientific review.
Okay, let's start by drilling down into the earliest intelligence, because this sets the foundation for why the scientific establishment should have been deeply suspicious from day one.
Okay, where do you want to start?
I want to look at the 2018 Defuse proposal. This was a pitch submitted to DARPA by Dr. Ralph Baric and Dr. Zhangli Shi of the Wuhan Institute of Virology.
Right?
The explicit goal of this project was to insert a furin cleavage site into a bat coronavirus to see how it affected human adaptation.
Wait, let's pause right there because we really need to define exactly what that means for the audience.
Oh, good point. So a furin cleavage site is essentially a biological master key. It perfectly fits human cell receptors.
Right, allowing a virus to fuse with our cells and replicate incredibly efficiently.
Exactly. It is the exact unique feature of SARS-CoV-2 that makes it so wildly infectious to humans. Now, by January 23, 2020, right as the virus is beginning its global spread, Dr. Baric is literally presenting slides to the ODNI's Biological Sciences Experts Group on the possibility of an accidental release.
Right, but...
The intelligence community effectively had the blueprint of the virus in a 2018 grant proposal, from the very lab located at the epicenter of the outbreak.
Hold on, you're looking at this in a total vacuum. You can't just call it a blueprint and ignore the context of what the diffuse proposal actually was.
It was a grant proposal outlining the exact virus.
It was a grant proposal that DARPA declined to fund. There is a massive operational leap between drafting a funding pitch in 2018 and successfully creating a pandemic-capable chimeric virus.
Meaning synthetically stitching together parts of different viruses?
Exactly. Stitching it together and then accidentally releasing it in 2019, exploring a hypothesis in a PowerPoint presentation to the ODNI in early 2020 does not prove the event actually happened.
I'm not convinced by that line of reasoning because you can't ignore the sheer statistical improbability of the situation. Think about it like a detective investigating a bank robbery.
Okay, a bank robbery.
Yeah. The detective finds a detailed step-by-step blueprint for robbing that exact bank using a highly specific and rare explosive. And the blueprint was drawn up by a known explosives expert who works across the street from the bank.
I see where you're going with this.
Right? The bank is then robbed using that exact rare explosive. If the chief of police then tells the detective to look elsewhere because the blueprint was never officially funded by the local crime syndicate, we would call that investigative malpractice.
Right, but
How could the scientific establishment dismiss the lab leak as a conspiracy theory when they had this defused document matching the virus's unique biological signature?
Your analogy assumes the rare explosive was completely unique to that one suspect. But in virology, furin cleavage sites exist in nature. They aren't synthetic anomalies.
But in this specific lineage of beta coronaviruses,
Coronaviruses recombine naturally all the time, though. They swap genetic material when two different viruses infect the same host. The scientific establishment wasn't ignoring the blueprint.
then what were they doing?
They were looking at the genomic sequencing of SARS-CoV-2 in real time and concluding that the backbone of the virus didn't match the known reverse genetic systems used by the Wuhan Institute.
Just to clarify for the listener, a reverse genetic system is essentially a molecular word processor. It allows scientists to synthetically edit and stitch together a virus's genetic code from scratch.
Exactly. That's a great way to put it. And the leading virologists at the time looked at the code of COVID-19 and didn't see the molecular watermarks that usually indicate that word processor was used. So when you say they dismissed it as a conspiracy, you're missing the fact that the broader intelligence community was genuinely divided. The National Intelligence Council had low confidence in both the natural origin and the lab leak theories early on.
Right.
That is indicative of a healthy, robust analytic process where different analysts weigh circumstantial evidence differently. It is the exact opposite of a monolithic cover-up.
I hear you. I do. But let's look at how that healthy analytic process was handled internally versus what was presented to the public.
okay.
Let's talk about the Declassified May 2020 Lawrence Livermore National Lab Report, their Z program report. This was a premier intelligence analysis that placed equal weight on a laboratory modification scenario.
Yes, they did.
They explicitly noted that the Wuhan Institute of Virology had the precursor viruses and the molecular word processors necessary to create SARS-CoV-2. Yet, this highly classified, rigorous report was completely marginalized. The public was fed a unified narrative of natural origin. Why?
Because you have to place yourself in the fog of war that was early 2020. The intelligence community is not comprised of virologists.
No, they're analysts.
Right. They are analysts. They rely on subject matter experts like Dr. Fauci to weigh competing theories. In February and March of 2020, the data heavily suggested a natural origin, aligning with historical precedents like SARS-1 and MERS.
But the data was shifting rapidly.
Sure, but when Dr. Fauci recommended the intelligence community look at specific papers, like the Tulane study on viral lineages, he was offering the prevailing epidemiological view of the global scientific community. He was doing his job as an advisor, not commanding a cover-up.
Okay, if he was just offering the prevailing view, why was he actively trying to shape it? Let's get into the September 2025 revelations from the Senate Homeland Security Committee.
The unredacted emails.
Yes, we finally saw the unredacted emails. In July 2020, Dr. Fauci forwarded a message calling Senator Rand Paul full of shit and explicitly wrote to his chief of staff, "Please delete this email after you read it."
Yeah.
And back in February 2020, he was on an email chain with Jeremy Farrar talking about trying to, quote, get ahead of the science and narrative. If you are purely following the data, you don't need to get ahead of the narrative.
Well,
And you certainly don't instruct federal employees to bypass the Federal Records Act and destroy communications during an active congressional probe.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that. Let me tell you why. That's a terrible optic, I agree. But you're equating a bad PR moment with the systemic destruction of federal scientific data?
I mean, deleting an email is literally destroying data.
Was it incredibly foolish for a high-level official to put in writing a profanity-laced vent about a sitting U.S. senator and ask for it to be deleted? Absolutely. It looks awful.
It is awful.
But venting about political grandstanding in an email is not the same thing as deleting the genomic sequencing of a virus. It is not destroying laboratory safety logs. We have to separate the human frustration of dealing with politicians from actual scientific fraud.
But the pattern of behavior goes beyond just venting. Let's look at what happened in 2021, long after the initial fog of war had cleared.
Okay, what specifically?
The declassified files show a June 4, 2021 briefing where Dr. Fauci met with CIA experts. During that meeting, he actively recommended they consult with a highly curated list of scientists.
He gave them experts to talk to, yes.
Who were they? They were the exact same scientists who had aggressively advocated for the natural origin theory and who had authored the infamous Lancet letter condemning the lab leak as a conspiracy.
Right. But
he wasn't giving the CIA a broad spectrum of experts, he was giving them a hand-picked echo chamber.
wait, let's unpack that. That same June 2021 CIA briefing, because the declassified documents show a much more complex picture. What else did Dr. Fauci do in that exact same meeting?
He asked about the Chinese data.
He actively pushed the intelligence community to obtain the medical records and the blood cultures from the 3 Wuhan researchers who reportedly fell ill in November 2019.
Right.
He specifically asked the CIA if they had formally requested this data through diplomatic channels. He wanted to know the granular specifics of the Chinese experiments on pangolins.
I know, but
I have to ask you, does a man who is the architect of a massive global cover-up actively direct the CIA to go hunt down the blood samples of the very researchers who supposedly leaked the virus? Those are the actions of a scientist searching for the truth.
Horace, those are the actions of a highly sophisticated bureaucratic operator.
Oh, come on.
Seriously, someone who knows exactly what questions to ask to appear cooperative on paper, while simultaneously ensuring the intelligence community relies solely on his loyalists for their core analysis.
That requires a level of Machiavellian planning that just doesn't fit the chaos of the time.
The fact remains that when the Z program produced a rigorous report stating a lab modification was highly plausible, it was buried. When the diffused proposal showed an exact match for the virus's key feature, it was downplayed.
Downplayed by some, elevated by others.
And when a senator asked tough questions, the instruction was, delete this email.
Which brings us to the core of this entire debate right now. Chairman Paul's subpoena.
Exactly. And this is why that subpoena is not just justified, but absolutely vital. Dr. Fauci allegedly agreed to testify voluntarily to the committee and then backed out, forcing their hand.
That's the political narrative, yes.
If you're listening to this and wondering why a single deleted email from 2020 matters so much now, it's because it establishes a pattern. When public health officials slow-walk information for 6 months,
They were dealing with a pandemic.
and when federal records are openly discussed as being deleted by the people in charge, what other option is there? Aggressive congressional oversight is the only mechanism left. This research was funded by the American taxpayer.
Well, let's talk about that oversight mechanism.
Let me ask you directly first. If Congress doesn't utilize its subpoena power when transparency fails, how else does the public get answers?
The problem with your premise is that it assumes a congressional subpoena is actually a mechanism for uncovering truth. It's not.
Of course it is.
Especially not in today's highly polarized environment. It is a mechanism for political theater. Let's look at the legal realities here, and I'm drawing heavily on the recent analysis from Covington and Burling regarding Congress's investigatory toolbox.
Please do.
We need to explain how this actually works mechanically. In a normal court of law, you have a neutral judge, you have basic elements of due process, you have attorney-client privilege.
Right.
Congressional investigations lack almost all of those protections.
When Chairman Paul issues a subpoena, he, the politician who has built a fundraising apparatus entirely around opposing you, acts as the prosecutor, the judge, and the jury regarding any objections to that subpoena.
It's an oversight committee.
They utilize impossible deadlines to force individuals into traps. They demand tens of thousands of documents in a matter of days, and when you inevitably fail to produce them, they threaten you with criminal contempt.
But that power is granted to Congress by the Constitution specifically to check the executive branch and the bureaucracy. It's a feature, not a bug.
Yes, oversight is a feature, but the modern application of that power has mutated. This subpoena is less about fact-finding and more about creating a bet-the-reputation crisis for the witness.
A bet-the-reputation crisis?
Yes. The threat of a perjury referral to the Department of Justice is immense. Even if the DOJ declines to prosecute, which they often do because the charges are flimsy, the referral itself is used to publicly vilify and destroy the careers of scientific professionals.
But if they have nothing to hide?
When you haul a public health official into a hearing room, put them in front of a camera, read their out-of-context emails from 5 years ago venting about politicians, and then threaten them with federal prison, you aren't conducting peer review. You are conducting an inquisition.
You say this is an inquisition. I say a congressional subpoena is a blunt instrument, but it's the only one available.
It's too blunt.
When agencies lock down their data and curate their experts, Congress can't use a scalpel. They have to use a sledgehammer just to get the door open.
But look at the cost of swinging that sledgehammer. The chilling effect this has on the entire scientific and intelligence community is profound.
I mean, transparency has a cost, sure.
Who is going to want to advise the government in the next pandemic if the reward for offering your best scientific assessment during a global crisis is a televised public trial years later?
It's not a trial.
It functions like one. Where every email you ever sent is dissected for political heresy, our best minds will simply refuse to serve. They will walk away.
That's a dramatic reading of it.
We are replacing the scientific method with the adversarial legal system, and those two frameworks are fundamentally incompatible when you are trying to understand the biology of a novel pathogen.
I see the risk there, I really do, but let's look at the chilling effect on the other side.
Okay.
What is the chilling effect on democratic accountability if unelected bureaucrats realize they can simply ignore Congress? If they realize they can delete their emails, curate the intelligence community's expert list, dismiss dissenting reports like the Lawrence Livermore analysis, and suffer zero consequences?
Again, you're assuming malicious intent?
The sweeping powers of Congress described by Covington and Burling are vast for a reason because the federal bureaucracy is incredibly opaque and incredibly resistant to external auditing.
But
when the stakes are a global pandemic that killed millions, we cannot prioritize the comfort of scientific professionals over the absolute necessity of uncovering how it started. If they had been transparent from day one, if they hadn't orchestrated things like the Lancet letter, there wouldn't be a need for subpoenas. They built the trap they are currently caught in.
But you are assuming the conclusion in order to justify the investigation. You are assuming the Lawrence Livermore report was definitively correct and that natural origin was definitively wrong.
I'm saying it deserved equal weight and transparency.
Science is an iterative process. It is messy. As more intelligence trickled in, the assessments shifted back and forth. That isn't a cover-up. That is how the scientific method and intelligence analysis are supposed to work in tandem.
Yes, but
By criminalizing the process of changing one's mind based on new data, Congress is actually incentivizing officials to never make a definitive statement at all.
But they aren't trying to understand the biology of the pathogen with this subpoena. They are trying to understand the sociology of the cover-up.
If there was one.
The declassified documents give us the roadmap for that sociology. They show the CIA reaching out to Dr. Barrack as far back as 2015. They show the defused proposal in 2018, mapping out the exact furin cleavage site. They show the early panic in January 2020 and the subsequent closing of ranks.
It's a selective reading of the timeline.
Well, let's pull back and summarize where we stand, because this is an incredibly complex issue with massive implications.
Definitely.
From my perspective, the newly declassified OD&I documents, combined with the unredacted emails uncovered by the Senate Homeland Security Committee, reveal a deeply troubling pattern. The scientific and intelligence communities at their highest levels prioritize narrative control and institutional self-preservation over objective inquiry. When you have top officials instructing staff to delete emails to bypass records laws and actively curating the intelligence analysis to exclude dissenting voices, you have left the realm of public health and entered the realm of narrative management.
Right.
In that context, Chairman Paul's aggressive use of congressional subpoena power isn't an overreach. It is the only viable mechanism left to ensure accountability to the American people.
And my summary is that when you look at these exact same documents, they show something much more human and much less malicious. They show experts grappling with an unprecedented, terrifying crisis in real time, working with fragmented and contradictory data.
Fragmented data, yes.
A frustrated official venting in an email about a politician is a terrible look, but it is not evidence of a global conspiracy to suppress the truth. Furthermore, weaponizing Congress's limitless investigatory powers against public health officials sets a highly destructive precedent.
We'll have to see how it plays out.
When you use tools that lack basic legal protections and due process to turn scientific debate into a pseudo-criminal proceeding, you ensure that in the next crisis, our best minds will refuse to help. They will fear being dragged before a committee and threatened with prison simply for offering their best analysis at the time.
Well, both of our perspectives highlight the immense difficulty here. We are trying to balance the need for scientific independence with the absolute requirement for government oversight.
It's a tightrope.
We can definitely agree that the origins of COVID-19 remain one of the most critical unanswered questions of our time. And the tension between these institutions is only going to escalate as more of these ODNI files are analyzed. There is undoubtedly much more to explore within this declassified intelligence.
Absolutely. The intersection of intelligence, biology, and politics is murky on a good day, and we are still just skimming the surface of what these documents actually mean.
Thank you for joining us for this rigorous intellectual exchange. Please be sure to like, subscribe, and follow the show so you never miss an update as we continue to unpack the most pressing debates of our time.
Thanks for listening, everyone.
Going back to our opening thought, we all want that pristine laboratory. We want the X-ray to show a clean break, a simple truth. We want the data to just speak for itself.
We really do.
But in the world of pandemic intelligence and congressional oversight, the waters are deeply, deeply murky. Sometimes the muddy waters are just muddy because science is hard. But sometimes you have to ask who is intentionally stirring the silt. We'll leave you to draw your own conclusions. See you next time on The Debate.